Stingrays have killed exactly 17 people in all of recorded history. And somehow, the ocean's most docile flat fish has a reputation that rivals sharks. This show are Stingrays Actually Overpowered. Roughly 1,500 Americans get stung by a stingray every single year. The stingray, apparently the most feared flat fish on the ocean floor, is survived almost exclusively by doing the stingray shuffle, sliding your feet through the sand instead of lifting them, so the buried ray hears you coming and moves first. The deadliest animal on the beach, defeated by a dance move. F tier. March 2024, off Bermagui, New South Wales. Drone operator Jason Moyse, better known online as Trapman Australia, is filming two guys doing absolutely nothing dangerous, just a casual swim. Then the slow motion replay happens. The footage shows both swimmers literally stepping on a black stingray the size of a dining room table. And that's not creative exaggeration. Black stingrays hit 13 feet long, 6 feet wide, 440 pounds. The barbed tail swings around and clears one guy's bare feet by inches. But here's the thing, Moyse himself confirmed, not an attack by any means. A creature the size of a dining table armed with a venomous barb chose to let them live. D tier. A 2023 Gulf Coast snorkeler decides the best way to photograph a southern stingray is to reach underneath it. 4-inch barb straight through the wrist. Clean entry, clean exit, and apparently zero venom injection confirmed by the ER, which is almost more insulting than getting poisoned. Full recovery. But the X-ray image? A stingray barb framed perfectly between two wrist bones, looking less like a medical scan and more like a cautionary PowerPoint slide somebody's biology teacher made. C tier. September 4th, 2006. Bat Reef, Queensland, Australia. Steve Irwin, the man who had a net worth of roughly 10 million built entirely on getting uncomfortably close to things that could kill him, was snorkeling in shallow water for a documentary shoot. A short-tailed stingray, panicked, drove its barb upward directly into his heart. And according to the camera crew on site, he pulled the barb out himself before losing consciousness. The thing is, short-tailed stingrays are not considered among the most dangerous rays. They're enormous, up to 14 feet across, 770 pounds, but the attack was almost certainly defensive. A reflex. A terrified animal that happened to aim perfectly at the one place a human being cannot absorb a barb and survive. This one really give answer of, are they really overpowered? S tier. Obviously. Grand Cayman's Stingray City Sandbar sees roughly 2 million tourist visits every single year. That's more human stingray contact than anywhere else on Earth, logged, documented, and apparently still not enough of a warning sign for one British vacationer in 2019. She knelt down on a ray to get a better look. The ray barbed her directly through the top of the foot. And here's the thing, local guides treat this as essentially a rounding error. Stingray City runs hundreds of interactions daily, and serious injuries are statistically rare enough that operators point to it as proof the animals are safe when respected. Which is true, but kneeling on one is not respecting it, that's just sitting on a stranger. Full recovery. Minor ER visit. A limp she probably still describes at dinner parties. The site is basically a controlled experiment in how rarely stingrays choose violence, even when humans make incredibly questionable decisions around them. C tier. Now Brazil, and this is where stingrays stop being a coastal beach problem and become a full public health crisis nobody outside South America seems to know about. Freshwater stingrays, genus Potamotrigon, live in Brazil's river systems. They sit in shallow riverbed mud, doing exactly what ocean rays do, except there is no coastline safety briefing. Just riverside communities wading in daily. The number is 2,000 plus envenomations per year in Brazil alone from freshwater rays. That is more annual stingray injuries than the entire United States coastal total, generated entirely inland by an animal most people don't even know has a freshwater cousin. And somehow, This doesn't even make international headlines. The venom causes intense localized necrosis. Treatment in remote river communities is frequently delayed by hours, sometimes days. Apparently the ocean gets all the fear and the rivers get all the actual injuries. See tiger. Now here's where they really become overpowered. San Diego, June 2022. A surfer steps on a round stingray, takes a barb to the ankle. Standard injury. The kind that makes the Stingray Shuffle entry level 22 look prescient. He waited, didn't treat it properly, didn't go in. 11 days hospitalized, partial tendon damage, a routine ankle sting turned septic because he let it sit. The thing is, the venom alone rarely does this. Delayed treatment does. An injury that belongs statistically at the bottom of this list climbed into surgical territory purely through neglect. C tier, but a cautionary one. Darwin, Northern Territory, 2020. A snorkeler is peering under a rock ledge when a stingray fires back. The barb hits the throat. It lodges 2 centimeters from the carotid artery. Here's what that means. The carotid carries roughly 20% of your total cardiac output to the brain. 2 centimeters is approximately the width of your thumbnail. That is the margin between a surgical case file and a fatality statistic. Surgeons spent 3 hours removing the barb intact. Attending staff later described it as one of the closest non-fatal misses on surgical record for a stingray incident. The patient survived with no arterial damage. The stingray wasn't hunting him. It was wedged under a ledge, cornered, doing exactly what every entry on this list has shown, a pure defensive reflex. The snorkeler just put his face where the reflex was aimed. Solid B tier. Survived, but only because surgeons had 3 hours and the barb had 2 centimeters of grace. Now we go back further, to prude they are much powerful. Then we imagine. 1945, Queensland, a commercial fisherman hauling nets pulls up something that pulls back. A stingray barb enters his chest wall mid-haul. Field surgery, conscious. Someone removes a serrated barb from his chest through sheer on-site improvisation. He survives. The case gets documented and quietly becomes the pre-modern medicine benchmark for serious stingray trauma. The reference point surgeons cited for decades when modern cases came in. The thing is, this guy took a chest barb and outlasted it with 0 pain management. B tier. Gordon Ramsay. 3 Michelin stars, a $220 million net worth, and apparently 0 tolerance for stingray venom. Around 2013, while filming a travel cooking segment in the Turks and Caicos, Ramsay got stung while wading in the shallows. He publicly described it as the worst pain of my life. The guy who calls contestants' risotto an embarrassment was undone by a reflex from a bottom dweller. Solid C tier. July 2018, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. A 9-year-old catches a barb straight through the palm, and the barb snaps off inside the hand. The serrated tip breaks clean and stays embedded in the palm of a child. The X-ray circulates everywhere. A child-sized hand, a foreign object visible in the soft tissue, surgeons required to extract it intact. And somehow this image did more for stingray awareness than any nature documentary ever managed. B tier. Palawan, Philippines, 2021. A fisherman is cutting a spotted eagle ray loose from his net, doing it a favors, and the ray drives its barb clean through his calf in return. And here is where the internet loses its mind, not over the injury, but over the taxonomy. Eagle rays are not technically stingrays. They're a separate family, Miliobatidae, which apparently makes a 507-pound animal with a serrated barb through your leg somehow less threatening in the comment section. The fisherman is hauled to shore, barb still embedded, bleeding through the boat floor. But the debate raging online is whether this counts. Forums spiral into ray classification arguments while a man in Palawan is having his leg treated with whatever a rural clinic in 2021 could offer. The thing is, the barb didn't care about the taxonomy. Neither did his calf. C tier. Gran Canaria, July 2019. One beach, 3 hours, 8 tourists stung by the same school of round stingrays displaced by unseasonably warm water, which, by stingray standards, is basically a mass casualty event. The thing is, 8 simultaneous victims sounds catastrophic until you remember round stingrays have a disc the size of a dinner plate and apparently didn't get the memo to actually finish the job. C tier. A diver in the Red Sea, 2017, catches a stingray barb to the forearm. Sounds survivable. And it was, technically. But the venom didn't just hurt, it started dissolving tissue. Localized necrosis, which is exactly what it sounds like, your arm begins quietly eating itself from the inside out. 3 separate skin graft surgeries over 6 months. The longest documented non-fatal stingray treatment on medical record. Not because the barb hit anything vital, it hit the forearm, but because stingray venom contains enzymes specifically designed to break down protein, and apparently nobody told it to stop. The thing is, every other case on this list either healed fast or killed you quickly. This one just took its time and billed you for it across 3 operating rooms and half a year of recovery, which makes it somehow the most medically exhausting non-death in stingray history. A tier. A 33-year-old man, Stingray City, Caribbean, 1999. One of only 17 recorded stingray fatalities in all of human history. And he wasn't doing anything reckless. He was at a commercial tourism operation, doing what roughly 2 million visitors do every year at sites exactly like it, feeding stingrays by hand in shallow water. Then a barb entered his chest cavity. This is the first documented death at a commercial stingray tourism operation ever, which, when you think about it, is somehow both shocking and inevitable. You build an entire industry around humans hand-feeding wild animals with venomous tail spikes, and statistically, eventually, the math catches up. The thing is, the site itself has an extraordinary safety record. Still, one wrong angle, and 1999 becomes the year the entire stingray tourism industry had to sit down and rewrite its rulebook. New safety protocols rolled out across Caribbean operators within months. The man did not survive. S tier. January 2023, Nha Trang Bay, Vietnam. A local fisherman is hauling catch when a stingray fires its barb clean through his forearm. Barb still partially visible, wound channel through soft tissue both sides. It spreads across Southeast Asian platforms and eventually hits Western medical forums, where trauma surgeons apparently spent actual conference time discussing the trajectory mechanics. The barb was removed, but the neuromuscular damage left him with permanent partial grip loss in that hand, which, for a fisherman, is roughly the equivalent of a pianist losing 2 fingers. The thing is, this wasn't a dive gone wrong or a tourist moment. This was just Tuesday. Just the guy doing his job. B tier. New Zealand, 2015. Off the Coromandel Peninsula, a spear fisherman encounters a large, short-tailed stingray mid-dive. The ray thrashes defensively once. That single motion lands 2 barbs, one through the thigh, one into the torso. Double envenomation is so rare that medical literature on it is basically a stub article. Short-tailed stingrays already produce venom in quantities calibrated for animals much larger than a human thigh, let alone 2 simultaneous injection sites. Emergency services airlift him out of the Coromandel. He survives, though the toxicological workload on his system is described by attending physicians as apparently extraordinary. A tier. April 2021, Queensland, Australia. A 7-year-old is wading in knee-deep water, barely enough to cover the ankles of an adult, when a stingray leaps clean out of the surface in documented defensive behavior. The barb passes within 2 centimeters of the child's eye. And here's the thing about that trajectory. A stingray barb to the eye of a 7-year-old is a surgical emergency with outcomes that don't get described in cheerful recovery press releases. The shoulder version? Surgically removed, full recovery. The child was back at home before the story even finished trending. This is the part of the countdown where the ranking stops being about pain scales and necrosis charts and starts being about pure geometry. Centimeters, fractions of a degree of arc. The entire difference between a scar on a shoulder and a catastrophic pediatric eye injury was the stingray being approximately this far off in its aim. It just came out of nowhere. That quote from the parents at the time is doing enormous heavy lifting. Obviously, a child wading in knee-deep water in Queensland is not a threat to anything. The Ray didn't know that. S tier near miss. A 77-year-old man in Texas, 2013, wading in shallow water. He gets stung in the ankle. Except the barb hits a varicose vein. And suddenly, the whole risk calculation changes. Blood loss begins immediately. His cardiovascular system, already compromised at 77, cannot compensate. Cardiac arrest follows. He dies. The death is officially ruled stingray-related, making him one of 17 people in recorded human history to share that designation. This is what the data actually looks like when you zoom in on those 17 deaths. It's about the stingray being exceptionally lethal. F tier, and not for the reason you'd expect. A diver in the Maldives 2022 decides the logical conclusion of a scuba trip is to grab onto a giant manta ray with a 23-foot wingspan and go for a ride. The manta thrashes, its vestigial barb stub, the rudimentary, barely there remnant biologists classify as functionally useless, drives directly into the diver's shoulder. Mantas are literally categorized as harmless. They don't hunt and chase, they filter plankton for a living. The barb isn't even a real barb by stingray standards, it's evolutionary furniture. But apparently, if you grab a 23-foot animal and refuse to let go, even the decorative spine becomes a medical emergency. This is the final entry in a countdown that started with 1,500 ankle stings and ends, here, getting hospitalized by an animal classified as incapable of hospitalizing you. D tier. The manta tried to warn him. S tier for the barb that ended Steve Irwin. Subscribe to the channel for more tier lists. We're done here.